Hi, I'm Wild Bill, and I want to talk about props and propaganda. This is important stuff. You think that we have enemies in the world, right? And you think, well, okay, that's permanent. We're going to hate the British forever because of the damn king that signed the stamp tax, right? We're going to hate them forever. They'll always be our enemies. Look at the kind of people they are. We're always going to hate the French because, find some reason. We're always going to hate the Algerians. We're always going to hate the Thais. We're always going to hate the Australians. We're always going to hate each other because we have these reasons. Well, these reasons are promoted to us through various media, sometimes through anecdotes, right? Don't work with those Hungarians. They're all like that, you know. Exactly. Well, we don't do that around here. We don't let any Vietnamese work here. The people that perpetrate these tropes are called clueless. They really are clueless because everything in the world works best when it's a meritocracy. Everything in the world works best when the most elite, the hardest working, the most intelligent of your workers become a network at the top, near the top, that advise the rulers, that advise the owners intelligently and make sense, not for their own short-sighted benefit, but for the benefit of the whole. So here's how well the media can be used to change public perspective. During the 1930s, the Japanese invaded Manchuria. Later on in the 30s, they invaded China proper. They had no reason. They just pursued what could very easily be translated as manifest destiny because we represent Japanese culture, which is the best and brightest culture and brings enlightenment to all cultures it touches. The world is our oyster. We deserve it. It's exactly the same thing as manifest destiny in the United States. So they weren't wrong. We taught them how to act, how to think. It's our fault. Understand? They used us as role models and we led them astray. So anyway, through various vicissitudes, especially the anti-immigration laws 1910, we managed to set up this like tension between ourselves and Japan. And Japan was already doing plenty for that. The Japanese were so strictly controlled in their own universe that when they reached a universe among people that they had been taught were inferior to them, they treated them most abominably. I beat my wife, but oh, you kid, this is getting to be a good time. And of course, those soldiers came back. Lots of them did. Millions did. After the war, they were shipped back, and they became respected members of society. Yakuza, right? And the Zaibatsu that had supported the war were still the Zaibatsu. Sony, was it Sony? Invented a rice cooker. Terrible rice cooker. But it sparked the post-war growth of the Japanese economy, turning swords into plowshares. So we fought a war with Japan in which the Japanese were characterized in our media as slopes and slant heads and squinty eyes and barbarians, buck-toothed barbarians. Since I don't have any buck teeth, I wish I was Japanese for that. I'd rather have teeth than not, let me tell you. Yeah, but still. We vilified them in our press. And happily for us, they earned those vilifications. Sometimes after the fact, but certainly they behaved most barbarously. By they, I mean individual Japanese soldiers responding to the orders of their higher-ups, responding to official pogroms promoted by the Japanese court. There isn't a single case in which the occupied country comes back and says, Japan brought us culture, made us better people. We're so happy that Japan invaded. Thank you, Japan, for being the light of Asia. Not a single nation came back saying that. They all said, oh, heaven help us against these horrible, awful, terrible, miserable, barbaric, primitive atavistic Japanese. And so, in our press, we were spun as the liberators. We were spun as the people who would bring democracy to these little nations, these tiny little nations that provided rubber to the world and provided oil to the world, and were the colonies of the great European nations, the Dutch, the English, the French. In the end, the war was lost by the Japanese. The Japanese world of imperial expansion reached its crest in early 1943, and then collapsed on itself like an old star becoming a neutron star. And after the war, when we realized that we were going to need a bulwark, as we called it, of capitalism, as we called it, against the evil Soviet menace, as we called it, and categorized it in our press, we resurrected the Japanese as a friendly, hardworking, industrious, intelligent, educated people, worthy of carrying forth culture as the light of Asia. Did you hear that rhetoric somewhere before? Yeah, you did. This is our media. After we had successfully vilified the Japanese as inhuman and subhuman, and absolutely no problem sticking a flamethrower in a guy's mouth when he's trying to surrender, pull that trigger, because he's not human. Just like he thought the Chinese weren't human. Just like the Germans thought that nobody but Germans were human. Yeah, it's been like that. So how do you get the American people to stop hating, vilifying, and blaming the Japanese for all the world's ills when you have just spent 12 years doing that in the press, almost 17 years doing that in the press to the best of your ability? I bet that spelled the death of Betty Boop, because she had a 1933 cartoon called A Language All My Own, and it's fantastic. Go watch it. And it's Betty Boop sings a song about she's got a language all her own, and then she hops in an airplane, dials up Japan on the autopilot, flies to Japan, does the whole thing in Japanese with Japanese trappings and settings. It's a beautiful artwork. It's magnificent. And there's a work of crossing out between cultures and saying we're all brothers under the skin. There couldn't have been a better one. And then Japan invaded Manchuria. And the tenor of our media changed. Japan was now impinging upon United States imperial assets and our influence in the Pacific. You get to the post-war era, when you've said many, many times that you can find the official documents, you can find the official films. Hey, the nukes weren't that bad. They're totally okay. Look at all these people that didn't die. You know? We don't know enough about cancers yet to be able to say, oh, these are environmental disasters of the highest order. Instead, we're like, oh, look how healthy everybody is. All these kids, look, that lived through it. They got bumps and bruises and stuff on them, and they bleed easy, but they're inhuman. I mean, they're our new friends. They're the bulwark of civilization. They are the light to the Orient. They are our defense against Soviet incursion into those poor, struggling nations that the Japanese had so barbarously treated, and that we had preached democracy to, and that they had helped us overthrow that Japanese oppression. And in every case, we gave those nations right back to the empire-building European nations who had so abused them before the war. In every case, the natives of those countries were in worse shape after the war than they were during the war, because we returned them to their abusers. We returned them to English. We returned them to French. We returned them to Dutch. Masters. Thank you for the joke. And those were abusive regimes in every case. So we had been the light of reason and democracy shining from the west, shining over the struggling Soviets, almost being destroyed by the German, whatever you want to call it, the German Juggernaut. I like to call it the Junkernaut because that's, get it, Junker, German, get it. Anyway, but we weren't. In every case, we denied liberty, we denied democracy to every one of those people after the war. We gave them back to their colonialist oppressors. And we helped enforce that. That's why we were in Vietnam. Look up the history. To stop a people from choosing its own political and economic course. To force them into an uneven, inferior relationship with a dying colonial power, France. Indochine. Did you think the French had been good masters? Because they hadn't. So, after the war, we now have to change this all around to make the Japanese our friends, to make the Germans our friends, because they're now going to be our border against imperialist Soviet ambitions. Because the workers' revolution wants to take over the whole world and make everybody miserable for the benefit of the few. It's not like capitalism that wants to take over the world and make everyone miserable for the benefits of the few. And it's not like socialism that wants to take over the whole world to make everything worse for everyone except benefit the few. Are you seeing a pattern here? Because I sure do. As a matter of fact, I see no other pattern in all of human history. Those people that we airily call the oligarchs of Russia, they are our oligarchs too. And they are the Chinese oligarchs too. No system holds power without the support of its richest contributors. That's the way of the world. There is no other. Has there ever been another? I don't think so. So after the war, when we have to make Mitsubishi friendly for American investors, Mitsubishi made the Japanese Zero fighter that killed so many of our boys, that attacked Pearl Harbor insidiously. A day that will live in infamy, you slope-headed, squint-eyed... Well, you friends, you democratically oriented monarchists. What does that even mean? England's insane. So anyway, you're our friends now. Thank you. Thank you for joining up with us. Thank you for not being little yellow monkeys that kill people for fun. Thank you for being intelligent, civilized, urbane, to have a culture so convoluted, so complex, so based on recognition from higher to lower that no Westerner could ever comprehend it. And you revel in that, don't you? Sure you do. Just like we revel in our empty lack of culture. Well, you don't know who the Kardashians are. You're a nobody. What? You're talking about the Kardashians? That's so last week. The Russians have a name for this. They am calling it neokulturny, which means no culture, without realizing that it's the best damn thing possible. No culture means you're not carrying the hates forward. No culture means you're not carrying the deep-seated, the deep-rooted resentments forward. No culture means you're not carrying the organized crime forward. So, there are benefits to neokulturny. Moje ruskaya drugi. So, after the war, we now have to scrub Japan from being a bunch of atrocity-committing yellow monkeys. Read the history. Watch the cartoons and the movies of the times and the serials in the cinema. Into our good and urbane and civilized and Western-leaning, pro-democratic friends. What a change, right? From, I'll die for the emperor to, hey man, nobody has to die. We're all like equals here. Wow. That's a big change, right? So, we did things with our media that no one can do. We changed public perception. That's how powerful our media is. We literally changed public perception in 3 or 4 years. That's all it took, because the Americans have no culture. So we don't have any deep-seated resentments or deep-rooted hatreds, except against our own people. But we have no reason to hate France. France didn't do us a dirty 500 years ago that we've never gotten back for. France didn't take Alsace-Lorraine from us. So, thank you very much for coming today. So here's what we did. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on this farm he had a duck, E-I-E-I-O. When a samurai lord went on the road with his retinue, 500 strong warriors and case carriers and laborers and palanquin carriers and flag bearers, and when he set off for Kyoto, the old capital, he'd go, E-I, E-I, and all his retainers would go, oh! Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I, oh! And if that wasn't bad enough, or good enough, because it's really how it worked, who came up with that? That's lovely. But then we go to another stage. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a dog. The dog's name was Bingo. B-I-N-G-O, like the game. B-I-N-G-O, a prefecture of Japan. B-I-N-G-O, that created the game. And Bingo was his name-o. That's how powerful, that's how persuasive propaganda can be. You just have to know how to apply it. And the geniuses aren't us. Those are the shadow eminences that I talk about when I talk about who really rules the world. The people that shape public opinion without you ever being the wiser. You're sitting there with your kids with your arms around them going, B-I-N-G-O, it's so American. No, it's so Japanese. Yeah. It's not my fault. It is my superior's fault. So I have to take the fault. That's unfair. That's trickle down. F you. Up your nose. So anyway, there's your story. That's how that works. We did it too. After World War I, we did John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. His name is my name too. Whenever I go out, the people always shout, there goes John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. Da-da-da-da-da. Fathers with their arms around kids. World War I veterans with their arms around future World War II veterans, singing happy songs about Germany because the war is over. And you need Germany as an economic partner. You don't want Germans boycotting your goods. And you have a huge German immigrant population in the Midwest. Where do you think all the Nazi groups come from in America? They all emanate from where all the Germans went. What do you think this stuff just grows up like roses on the side of the road? Roses don't grow on the side of the road. Only skunkweed does. Anyway, so we have done this successively and successfully, amazingly, because we don't hate the gypsies. But you go all through Europe, you'll find people that hate the gypsies, and all the stories are about dirty gypsies, and they bring venereal disease, and they steal, and they're inhuman bucktooth bastards. See what I mean? And that's propaganda. That's propaganda turning your minds dark against an innocent group of people just trying to survive. And the same with any group that someone's trying to turn your mind against. That person's a hate monger. And that person wants you to hate for his ends, not for the betterment of anything, just for his pleasure. That's not a good enough reason. Instead, remember, after every war, you have to let those people into your hearts again. In Sharpsburg, the greatest evidence of how things can change is the Sharpsburg Pharmacy down where the Gausu statue is, became the Ho Chi Minh Palace Restaurant. I walked past that and looked at it and thought, like, how should I feel about this? Because I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I'm not a Vietnam veteran, but I was in the service during the Vietnam War. I know how we felt. I understand how the media was spinning it. I understand how the counter media was spinning it, because Russia was funding the hippies. Oh, yeah. Wait, and I love hippies, but Russia funds our splinter groups, our political activist groups, our hate groups. And we fund theirs. It's been going on forever. But after the war, they have to be our friends again. But that evil dictator bastard that's enslaved his millions of people to destroy world capitalism, which is the only thing that can possibly save us, fossil fuel industry. Sorry. The truth hurts, and I'm experiencing synesthesia, so I see that as comedy. But those people then have to be our jolly guy with the raspberry on his head. And he's cool. We didn't realize how cool Russia was. Because look how cool they are. And look, and they're helping us at the space station. Wait, they are putting modules on the international space. The idea of one world. America never thought of that before, except with them at the helm. I'm getting drunk on myself, but still. And now they're them dank Russian bastards again. Let's do the anti-Russian memes, boys. And then this war will be over someday. And our propagandists, because that's who they are, Disney was a propagandist. That's how he got his start. Read the history. Dr. Seuss, propagandist. That's how he made his money. Read your history. But these guys will then be turned again to the job of making the Russians palatable to us. Look at all these wonderful cultural traditions. Not the ones they crushed, but the ones they maintain. Look at the patriarch system. Ooh, Orthodox Christian. Wow, things are different in different places of the world. How could that be? America, slap. So that's how powerful propaganda is. Propaganda changed your mind and continues to change your mind every day. And somewhere there's people that know so much about you that they're able to do that to you. And you wonder, what are their motives? What do they think of you? What is your importance in that system of theirs? And should you be angry that you are so easily manipulated by people into hating and into not hating? And why aren't those people making it so no one hates anyone? Isn't that the system we want? Isn't that the egalitarian meritocracy that will make the world a better place, despite all of our stupidity, our lack of wisdom in how we utilize its resources? Ooh, I hate making deep messages. It makes me fear for my existence. Some guy that could make that change will think like, ooh, I don't like the way he's thinking. And that's the wrong way to react. You're supposed to be like, well, yeah, dude. Open up your onion another layer and you'll see us hard at work. I haven't seen that yet. I hope I get to. So that's propaganda. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. They can make you love, they can make you hate. Why do they choose to do one or the other? Why do they then change their minds? These are important questions to ask yourself. But you're getting bored of listening to me, so I'm getting out of here. This is Wild Bill.